Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to another segment of Voices of Empowerment with Dr. B. I am Dr. B. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Sunday to you. This has been an absolutely amazing, amazing, amazing time so far. This week that ended, oh, phenomenal. Phenomenal. I've been getting so much wonderful news, so much news of transformation, of growth, of expansion, not just for me, for those I know and love. And I love that. Oh my God, I love to see us win. I love to hear about us winning. I love to hear about new doors opening up for you, expansion, moving ahead, forward, leaving things behind, all of those things. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And I am looking forward to hearing more, especially in this week coming. We are at the start of a new week. This is the start of a new season, new week, new time, new level, new opportunity, new. And I am here for it. Happy August to you all. We are on August 3rd already, y'all. Listen, these days are not playing with us. They are not playing with us. And I am here for it. I'm here about it. I'm here with it and all of the things. And I'm here to receive whatever this season, this time, these days, these moments have to offer me. And I hope you are too. Well, as you all know, we come together on Sundays and Tuesdays to read collectively our book reading, our literature that we're reading, whichever one that we're reading in that season. And right now, we're reading through the amazing yet provocative, confrontational book, Caste: The Origins of Our Discontents, written by Isabel Wilkerson. When I tell you, I saw the movie first, Origins. You will be able to see the movie Origins either on Prime, Amazon Prime, or I forget what other network it would have. It may just be Prime. You want to watch the movie, okay? The movie, this book is not a nonfiction. It is absolute. I mean, it's not a fictional book. It is an absolute nonfiction book. It is true occurrences, true things that are happening. She's writing about the reality of segregation and isolation and prejudice and racism and all of those things and where it began and why it's still here. Why is it still being perpetuated? And not just here in the Americas. No, no, no. She's confronting it everywhere on the planet. And although it's ugly, it's uncomfortable, it's necessary. It is necessary. And it's been some hard sections. Some, oh my goodness, some of them has been very hard to digest. I barely made it through some of them without breaking down. You know what I'm saying? Um, and in some, I broke down on the air. It's difficult to know that this is a thing that is forever written in the fibers of this planet. You know, and it's a little disheartening that for whatever the reason, we have allowed a very temporary exterior, a very temporary exterior to wedge a divide in cultures and nationalities and people, just beings, humanness. We've allowed shades of complexion and language barriers to determine who gets love and who doesn't, who gets treated like a human and who doesn't. It's very, 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 very disheartening. And it's even worse. What's even worse is that it's still going on right now as we speak. And so, in order for us to really, really, really forge ahead with solution, we have to confront what is, what was, and what is in order to um, find out how we can band together and fix, repair, heal. That's really what we need to do is heal, okay, as a collective. All right, so this book is showing us how to do so. Now, without further ado, we are on chapter 17. Okay, chapter 17 is entitled On the Early Front Lines of Caste. Okay, We are airing live on Clubhouse, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of the platforms simultaneously. If there's something that you feel that you want to say and add to the conversation, feel free to do so. Um, you can utilize the chat, the comment section, all of that, and I will give voice to your words. If you would like to obtain your own very own free copy of this book, you can do so. At the end of the segment, I'll show you how. It's always free. Okay. Yes, we are a nonprofit organization. Yes, we do welcome donations to our organization and towards our mission. No, it is not required for you to get your reading. Okay. Alrighty, here we go. Without further ado, this is Caste, the Origins of Our Discontent, Chapter 17, on the early front lines of Caste. In the fall of 1933, a distinguished black couple, newly returned from their studies in Europe, headed south from Virginia in the direction of Nashville and then, with both dread and anticipation, passed the symbolic Iron Curtain into the heart of Jim Crow, Mississippi. They were anthropologists embarking on a perilous 2 year study of the social hierarchy of the South. They were entering hostile and alien territory where they would have to learn to sublimate their upright bearing and submit to the humiliations of the social order, knowing that any slip up would cost them their lives. They could not reveal the true nature of their mission at their final destination of Natchez, Mississippi. They would have to watch their every step in a world that preferred to keep its feudal conventions to itself and to keep people who looked like them in their place. They were driving headlong into a region where a black person was lynched every 4 days for some breach, large or small, of those conventions. They would soon discover that just weeks before their arrival, a black man had been lynched in the county next to Natchez under accusation of raping a white woman that even many local whites did not believe. Allison Davis was an impeccably tailored academic with the sculpted, square jawed face of a film star, and his wife, Elizabeth, was a model of refinement. But their path had been a twisting obstacle course. Just the previous spring, they had cut short their advanced studies at the University of Berlin and fled Germany when Hitler took power. They had seen the Nazis burn books and jail teachers, and this gave him new insight into the nature of hate, and combined with the burdens he bore in his own country, further inspired him to examine injustice. Davis was a young anthropologist with 2 degrees from Harvard University and a wealth of experience abroad, but once in Mississippi, he could not in any way act like it. He would have to conceal his inner self to survive. The couple had chosen to make the personal sacrifice for the greater good of documenting the structure of human division, a mission that would practically render them undercover agents. Urbane and bespectacled though he was, he decided it best to keep a gun in the car to protect himself and his wife if it came to it. In Natchez, they would be joining the other half of their team, a white couple named Burleigh and Mary Gardner, 2 other Harvard anthropologists who, in keeping with the plan, had preceded the Davises to Mississippi. The mission was quietly revolutionary. Together, they would embed themselves in a closed and isolated southern town from both sides of the caste divide. Coming from the north, neither couple could fully know what they were getting themselves into. This was in the depths of the Jim Crow caste system, and they would find their every move dictated by the very phenomenon that they were studying. This would be among the first studies of its kind and a groundbreaking experiment in interracial scholarship. They would have to plan every detail of their interaction with the local people and come up with plausible reasons for the 4 of them to be together in this alien landscape. Given the dangers, they would not be able to tell the local people to the full intention of their project, that they were seeking to infiltrate the white and black worlds to accurately render how caste, class, and race operated in the region. The 2 couples were to report back to a senior professor who was overseeing the project from Cambridge. The pioneering anthropologist W. Lloyd Warner anticipated the dangers the team would face and went to Natchez himself ahead of the 2 couples to scout out the area and to prepare the town for their arrival. Warner met with the mayor and law enforcement officials and with editors of the local newspaper before leaving the team on his own. He told town officials that they had chosen Natchez to represent a typical southern town and that the researchers would be collecting data to compare it with a town in the north. This was not altogether untrue. Warner had completed research on social stratification in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and could find the comparison useful. The officials in Natchez were delighted to share the history of their town with the white husband and wife team, but it was harder for the team to come up with a credible reason for African American scholars to come into town doing research. They made the decision to tell the locals that the black researchers were there to study the black church, a safe enough subject for the town fathers to accept. As a measure of how far ahead of society the researchers were and of the proficiency of Allison Davis, it was he, the black anthropologist, who was chosen to lead the team on the ground in Natchez. There were two different castes studying caste in the belly of the caste system. In order for the mission to work, the white couple went in first to get established before the black couple showed up. The Gardners rented rooms in an old country mansion as their base of operations and began gaining acceptance in Natchez society. But they had to give more forethought into where the Davises would live. The mansion was isolated, and the Davises would be uncomfortably, perhaps dangerously, conspicuous in that rural setting. Finding housing for them was a challenge in a region where most African Americans were sharecroppers living in lean to cabins. The team finally moved the project into the town itself, and the Davises rented rooms from a black doctor who opened the way to the town's few black elites. The couple soon found themselves embedded in their respective and separated castes, but that restricted them in other ways. The team needed to study the layers within each caste, the elite and the lowly. But the social hierarchy drew such stark lines that even within one caste, fraternizing with those not seen as on one's level invited scrutiny and potential ostracism. To reach poor white residents, the lower class of the dominant caste, Mary Gardner took a position as a government caseworker in a New Deal project program, which allowed her to meet poorer whites and to visit their homes. That was not an option available to Elizabeth Davis, as the Davises sought to meet with poorer black residents. At the time, few African American women were permitted to hold those government jobs in Mississippi, and the federal relief that Mary Gardner was in a position to extend to the whites she met was not then being extended to poor blacks in Mississippi. Allison Davis sought to recruit a fifth researcher, St. Clair Drake, a former student of his who decades later would become a renowned scholar of mid 20th century life in Chicago. The northern bred Drake was not keen on spending months or years in the Jim Crow South, where only a few years before, 9 young black men known as the Scottsbury Boys had been imprisoned in neighboring Alabama, accused of attacking 2 white women who later recanted their stories. Davis convinced him of the transcendent purpose of the mission. You can't really smash the system if you don't understand how it works, David told him. Drake agreed to come, and he spent his time with sharecroppers and domestics with the Davises, now seen as part of the sliver of upper middle class blacks in Natchez, no longer had readily explainable access to. They were all locked in the roles into which they had been accepted, having to do whatever their subcaste did or compromise their foothold in their research setting. Their lives depended upon obeying the rules they had come to study and proving themselves loyal to the caste to which they were ascribed. Mary Gardner, the white woman researcher, went so far as to climb into a hoop skirt and to serve as hostess at a mansion tour to which she had been invited. It was perilous to step out of character, perilous for the white couple to be seen as too closely aligned with the Davises, with whom in that world the dominant caste would have had minimal contact. Out in public, they had to remain in character at all times, with the Davises required to show difference to the Gardners and had never given the appearance that they were, in fact, friends and colleagues in the trenches. The two women found that they could not be seen together in public at all, had to conceal how well they knew each other, the caste system disallowing that kind of camaraderie between women of different castes. Their encounters were limited to an occasional chance meeting at the chain grocery store in the center of town, wrote David A. Varel, Davis's biographer. There they exchanged only a polite, restrained greeting. Over time, the white researchers came to see firsthand the barriers that African Americans face. Wherever they went, if they were together, there was no guarantees of food or restrooms for the Davises. Every move had to be thought out in advance with consideration of caste protocol. There were times when Gardner, the white researcher, had to request the bathroom key if Davis were to be allowed to use it. Davis was the leader of the team, but they could not let the locals know that. They had to keep to their caste performance. It was a revolutionary concept, this idea of an educated black man working with a white man in this way to begin with, a spectacle the likes of which the townspeople would never have seen before. They couldn't pretend that they weren't working together, but it was explained to them and generally understood by others that Allison was working for Burleigh. This was the only acceptable relationship between a white man and a Negro, Burrow wrote. Just to meet and discuss their findings required an elaborate choreography. They had no outside office and could not go to each other's homes without arousing suspicions or causing discomfort. It did not sit well with the caste system for a white person to visit a black person, so Gardner could not visit Davis. It would not have been permissible and, in fact, expected for a subordinate caste person to go to the dominant caste person's location for the convenience of the upper caste person. But for purposes of morale and dignity, it would have been unacceptable for Davis, as the team leader, to walk through the back door of his colleague's home. It was not enough to say that Allison was working for Burleigh. Each of them was expected to behave strictly according to his caste role, Varel wrote. So they created a protocol for themselves whenever they needed to meet. One would telephone the other to make an appointment. Davis would arrive at an agreed upon corner. Garner would pick him up, and they would drive into a rural back road to go over their work in a car without bringing undue attention to themselves. Even this, they knew, was a breach of the caste system, but it was their only option if they were to get their work done. Later, Gardner happened to learn that both the chief of police and the sheriff were informed of each meeting, Verrill wrote. The sheriff and the chief police, did not intervene, but it was so serious a violation that the sheriff felt compelled to keep tabs on the two men. This surveillance was a reminder that at any given moment, the authorities could shut down their project or works. The sheriff could seize their notes at any time, exposing the true nature of the larger study and destroying the data that they were gathering, Verrill wrote. To protect their research, they made frequent mailings to Warner back in Cambridge, but Allison had to be careful in doing so. Frequent mailings by a Negro, especially an educated Negro, would have aroused suspicion in the middle class white postal clerk, Verrill wrote. The whole Negro white research, Warner once said, was delicate and filled with dynamite. Mm. 1941, as the United States prepares to enter the Second World War, the Davis and Garner team emerged from with perhaps the most comprehensive study to date of the American caste system. The volume of 538 pages long, entitled Deep South, a social anthropological study of caste and class. It described the layers of social classes within the two major castes in America, white and black people. Davis and the Gardners determined that caste was the fundamental division in the Jim Crow town they studied, built on economic interdependence, in which the caste system and the economic system reinforce each other. Listen to me. This is so key. The caste system and the economic system reinforced each other. They documented the multiple rungs within the two castes, the layers of classes within each caste, the social control employed to keep the castes separate, and the slave like conditions and power structure on the plantations in America as it approached the middle of the 20th century. They chronicle the rigid codes of conduct required to maintain the hierarchy. A black landlord, for instance, had to walk to the back door of his own building to collect rent from his white tenants. The team described the terror campaign against the subordinate caste, the daily menace to the sharecroppers who were subject to ambush in the planters' whipping parties, and the risk to the Davises themselves as they documented the assaults on other African Americans. It had taken them 8 years to publish their findings, and even then, the researchers were bedeviled with setbacks and the disadvantages of both castes and timing in getting it out to the world. They had begun the work in the midst of the Great Depression and thus faced the ongoing challenging challenges of financing a project that seemed risky from the start. 2 years in, with the depression worsening and the project taking longer than expected, the Davises, who had borne the brunt of the humiliation that confronted their caste, and with the least personal resources, found themselves so strapped for money that they had to take on teaching duties at Dillard University, an underfunded, historically black institution in New Orleans. There, Allison Davis was weighed down with a teaching load of 5 courses each semester while trying to complete the larger caste study. Worn down by the isolation and indignities, having to perform in character over the course of several years, he fell into a depression over their circumstances. At the same time, competition arrived on the scene. The Mississippi Delta got crowded with young social scientists investigating this feudal country within a country, as the Depression had raised interest in rural and Southern poverty. And while the interracial Davis and Garner team had spent far longer, years in fact, living under the caste rules, they were studying two Yale anthropologists, both white and working in the same area in two separate studies, spent several months in Mississippi, and with their shorter timelines, were able to beat the Davises and the Gardners' more comprehensive study to publication. John Dollard of Yale spent 5 months in Indianola. Hortense Powdermaker, also of Yale, spent 9 months there in the 1932-33 school year, and another 3 months in 1934. Dolliard's 1937 book, Caste and Class in the Southern Town, was the first of the three major works to be published. It received wide acclaim and defined the emerging field. Dollard was hailed as a pioneer, while the Davises and the Gardners were still analyzing their volumes of data. Dollard acknowledged the limits of his work, conceding that as a white Yankee on the Southern caste system, he ran headlong into caste taboos that restricted his access to African Americans. The local whites he needed to rely on couldn't understand why he would be interested in black residents. When he told some white residents of his plan to visit a black woman's home, he said he was ostracized from the town. Horton's Powdermakers After Freedom, A Cultural Study in the Deep South, was published next in 1939. Both Dolliard's and Powdermaker's books were met with spirited reviews and came to dominate the field of Southern caste scholarship. Even decades later, the journal American Anthropologist in 2004 described the two books as canonical, landmark studies, consigning the Davises and Garner book to the footnotes. Deep South was published in 1941 and has long been overshadowed by the two earlier books produced by scholars from the dominant caste. The Davis and Garner project seemed to meet the same fate of the marginalization as as the subordinate caste that they had studied. Neither Davis nor Gardner made the claim that the Indian caste system and the American one were identical. Yet, criticism of the idea of caste in America followed a pattern in caste relations that the team documented in Mississippi. They found that African American workers trained in the subordinated behavior and perspective necessary to survive in a caste system were more likely to show respect for people in the dominant caste and to disregard or feel freer to criticize those from their own subordinated caste. For a range of complex reasons, some leading African American social scientists of the early to mid 20th century objected to Davis and others applying the notion of caste to the plight of African Americans, even as they were living under one of the purest forms of it in American history. Restricted as they were, locked behind the walls of the caste with no end in sight, They did not want to give credence to the possibility that the system might indeed be closed forever. If their status was seen as a fixed one, there might be no hope of rising above it. They were deep in a caste wilderness before Brown versus Board of Education, before the Montgomery bus boycott, before the 1963 March on Washington and the civil rights legislation of the 1960s that would formally prohibit the caste restriction they were then living under. In the middle of the 20th century, no one could have dreamt of a member of the subordinate caste sitting on the Supreme Court, becoming Secretary of State, being in the Oval Office as a president rather than as a butler. The lowest caste had yet to break free and disprove the assumptions of group inferiority that were the justification of the caste system, show that its members were as capable as anyone else in any endeavor, from singing Verdi at the Metropolitan or orbiting space to winning Nobel Prizes. These things were inconceivable because the caste system had disallowed any possibility of them. Thus, there was an understandable fear that invoking the fixed and formal millennia long caste system of India could forestall the few hard earned gains they had managed to achieve. Any success that Davis might see was itself a challenge to the caste system. And as one of the few African Americans given the chance to conduct this kind of research, he walked a narrower path, had put his life on the line in a way others had not, and was in line for more criticism than dominant caste researchers might receive. The white researchers who were published before Deep South had the chance to seize on the novelty of the idea, were more readily embraced by the mainstream and accorded more authority due in part to their position in the dominant caste. Despite their immersion and mastery of the subject, Davis and Gardner fell under greater scrutiny and faced more obstacles just to complete their book. Publication was delayed in part because a leading Black sociologist, Charles Johnson, trained in a different discipline, raised lengthy questions about manuscript, which required Davis and Gardner to embark upon a significant revision. Davis, as a lead researcher, was an easier target for criticism, particularly from peers in the subordinated caste who were under pressure to uphold the hierarchy if they wished to succeed, and who would have been wary of calling into the question the work of dominant caste scholars. The resistance of Davis's work inadvertently proved the very theories Davis had devoted his life to exposing. The concept of caste grew only more contentious as it was applied to the United States at mid century. One leading sociologist, the Caribbean born Oliver Cromwell Cox, assembled a cantankerous critique of this school of thought in his landmark 1948 book, Caste, Class, Race, a study in social dynamics. He devoted 100 pages to his reading of the Indian caste system and later chapters to the differences between the hierarchies of the two countries. An underlying argument of his contrarian view was that the caste system in India was singular because it was considered stable and unquestioned, because even the lowest caste embraced their degraded lot as the fate of the gods. The fact that Black Americans resisted their condition both in slavery and afterward and aspired to equality was evidence to Cox that the term caste could not be applied to this country. If, for instance, the Negro white relationship were a caste relationship, he wrote, Negroes would not be aspiring toward the upper social position occupied by whites. In India, however, caste barriers in the caste system were never challenged. He wrote in the bafflingly misguided observation. From his perspective, up and down the Indian caste system, regardless of his position in the society, a man's caste is sacred to him, and one caste does not dominate the other. Despite his brilliance, he disregarded both the injustices inflicted upon Dalits by castes that most certainly dominated them and the basic human will to be free. And he overlooked the fiery resistance and leadership of Bimroa Ambedkar and the other Dalits who were challenging the caste system at the very moment of his writing. Before Cox's excoriation of the notion of caste, the findings of Davis and the Gardners got reinforcement from perhaps the most ambitious work ever attempted on the race in America. The monumental two-volume American Dilemma, published in 1944, It was based on the research of a team of scholars, including Davis and his contemporary Johnson, and was overseen by the Swedish social economist Gunnar Myrdal. In this analysis of race, Myrdal described intergroup relations in the United States as a caste system, a term he returned to time and again. The caste system, Myrdal wrote, is upheld by its own inertia and by the superior caste interest in upholding it. Davis would go on to get a PhD in anthropology at the University of Chicago and join the faculty there, thus becoming the first Black tenured professor at a major white American university. But he would suffer additional indignities. Faculty colleagues openly debated whether he should be allowed to teach white students, and he was prohibited from eating in the faculty dining room for a time. Of the major scholars of the American South in the first half of the 20th century, he and his wife were among the only field researchers who labored under the cloud of caste subordination themselves. Their work would end up inspiring St. Clair Drake, Stokely Carmichael, and Martin Luther King Jr., among others, all of whom read his work as undergraduates and saw themselves in his analysis. Allison Davis was nearly lost to history, but he has become a champion to current date researchers who seek to understand the infrastructure of our divisions. He brought a singular depth of commitment to understanding the caste system in hopes of defeating it. He had taken on the challenge as if his life had depended upon it, because in a very real way, it did. Wow, 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 wow. On the front line, on the front line, my goodness. That it took some bravery to go inside of that system, like you said. If you want to know how it works, you got to get in there. And they did. And they did. Wow, 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 wow. That was dangerous, but it was brave. And as a people, I have to say thank you to them. I'm not sure if they're still here. They may not be still here, but I gotta say thank you to them for even braving the storm, being so brave to go into those areas where they could have lost their lives. They could have absolutely lost their lives. But they did it for the sake of the research, for the sake of exposing the injustices. My goodness. My goodness. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so that is the end of this book. I'm going to be kind of thinking about that. My word. How brave are we, right? What are you brave enough to do? Would you have done that? Would you have sacrificed yourself to do that, to go and for the greater good of it all? Would you have done that? Man, that's a lot. That's wow. That's wow. I'm grateful to them. Grateful to them. My goodness. Okay, you all. So that is the end of chapter 17. On Tuesday night, we will be reading chapter 18, Satchel Paige and the Illogic of Caste. Satchel Paige and the Illogic of Caste. Okay. So we'll be reading that 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. If you need this book, it's not too late to get your book. Feel free to reach out to me. You can send me a message via inbox from wherever you're listening, or you can send me an email to info@biancamissbeeley.com. Again, info@biancamissbeeley.com. You make your request, and in the email, let me know which email address you want me to forward the book to you. I will send it to you. It will come to you via ebook form, okay, PDF, so that you can have it. You can read along with us. We would love to have you, or you can read it as by yourself. You can feel free to visit my website. Go to the website for Clubhouse. It's right above my head. Just tap the link above me, and you'll go straight there. Everywhere else who's viewing via video, it's on the screen. You can visit the website. Feel free to do so. Not only will you see everything that I do, you will also see the most potent cosmic transits that's going on right now. Okay. You'll see the information on how you can harness the energy from it. You'll see the latest shadow work project that we're doing. You will see we're updating that tomorrow. We're starting a new series tomorrow, so be on the lookout. Okay. You'll see different things: merchandise, books, courses, services, and things like that. You can take advantage of. Okay. Follow me on social media, you all: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Twitter, everywhere, 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 everywhere. Clubhouse, it is under Dr. Bianca Miss B. Lee, okay? Dr. Bianca Miss B. Lee. Alrighty, you all listen. I love you. I mean it. There is absolutely positively nothing you can do about it. Don't you even try it. We'll see you back here on Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Voices of Empowerment with Dr. B. Peace.